than dawn. Washington and his men attack Trenton, and the Hessians are caught completely off guard. They have no idea he's coming. Guess who's among the first to die in the American attack? Colonel Johann Rall, the man that never took the message out of his pocket. So Colonel Rall is among the first to die in this American attack, and any Hessian soldiers that survived were captured. It was a decisive victory for the Continental Army at Trenton. Well, word gets out, and General Cornwallis rushes reinforcements to the Trenton area, and they arrive on January 2nd, 1777. So word gets out about this American attack upon Trenton. British General Cornwallis sends reinforcements to Trenton, which arrive on January 2nd, 1777. And his plan is to attack the Continental Army early the next morning of January 3rd. So Washington and his crew, after the victory at Trenton, stay there. Well, the night before the reinforcements arrived, Washington's forces slip quietly away during the night. They leave their campfires burning to deceive the British again that they are still camped there. And this event of Trenton is a stunning victory for the Continental Army. It's a huge morale boost, keeping the revolution alive. Okay? So we still are just fighting to keep the revolution alive. Well, what does Washington get after this victory? He gets a morale boost. He gets more soldiers to come and help. And after this victory at Trenton, the Continental Army defeat the British at Princeton as well. So they get a victory at Trenton and another victory at Princeton. He follows up the victory at Princeton with another victory at New Brunswick, where he raids British communication and supply lines. So he gets another victory, the Continental Army, at New Brunswick. 3 victories in New Jersey, back to back to back. And when that happened, British General Sir William Howe pulled his troops out of New Jersey and took them back to where? New York. So, because of these victories in New Jersey, Trenton, Princeton, and New Brunswick, British General Sir William Howe pulled his British troops out of New Jersey and back into New York. And as these victories in New Jersey accumulated, morale got better, Washington's Continental Army grew, as many colonial men flocked to his side. So, a person you've never heard of again saves the American Revolution. Thanks to John Honeyman, the American colonists will fight on in their attempt to win their independence from Great Britain. Without John Honeyman, we're sunk. How many ever heard of John Honeyman? That's the idea. That's why this is an advanced placement class. Okay? That'll take us then to another great story, the Battle of Bound Brook. The Battle of Bound Brook. Keep your eye on Connecticut right here. Okay? In the Battle of Bound Brook, the British defeats at Trenton, Princeton, and New Brunswick gave them more determination to end the war. The British goal was to end this war in 1777. And those defeats that they took at Trenton and Princeton and New Brunswick actually gave the British more determination. Hey, we better end this thing in 1777 before these colonists get what? More morale and more belief they can win. Well, the plan at this time was to separate New England from the rest of the colonies. Okay? They wanted to separate New England from the rest of the colonies. And New England are these colonies here, which separate New York and New Jersey. This is New England, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Vermont, Maine. This is the New England area. So what state kind of is the state that the fighting is going to happen to try to cut them off from New England? Connecticut. Okay? So the fighting is going to happen in Connecticut. Well, on April 13th of 1777, the British assault a town in Connecticut known as Danbury. And the reason they assault the town of Danbury, Connecticut, is they wanted to seize the colonial army ammunition and supplies that they had stored there. So on April 13th of 1777, the British assault the town of Danbury, Connecticut. And the reason they assault that particular town is they're going to seize the colonial army's ammunition and supplies that are stored there. Well, they're going to move from Danbury into New York. And so as they set the town of Danbury ablaze, a messenger, a colonial messenger, was sent to Fredericksburg, New York, to get the militia there to come back and help where? In Connecticut. So as the town of Danbury is set ablaze, a colonial messenger is sent to Fredericksburg, New York, because there's a colonial militia stationed there and they need help, because they do not want Connecticut to fall to the British and separate New England from New York. Well, the messenger rides and he arrives in Fredericksburg, New York, and he delivers this message of needing help to a fellow by the name of Henry Luddington. Henry Luddington receives the message that was sent from Danbury. Now, the reason that Henry Luddington got the message is he was the leader of 400 militiamen that are the only force in the area that can go back and help save Danbury, and more importantly, save those supplies and ammunition that the British are after. So they don't want to lose the colonial supplies and ammunition in Danbury. So here's the British, they've attacked Danbury, they set the place afire, they're trying to get the colonial ammunition and supplies, and a messenger is sent from Danbury to Fredericksburg, New York, and he gives a message to Henry Luddington saying, hey, we need support, can you get your militia roused and come to our defense? Well, his men are spread all over the area. They're not all sitting at his house, right? So he's alone without his men. And what Luddington needs to do is he needs to get the word out to as many of his militiamen as possible. Well, these men are spread out all over the countryside with their families. And he's got to get the word, hey, I need you to report to my farm as soon as possible so we can get organized and provide support to Danbury. So he needs a messenger to do that. Well, who does he want to do it?
This guy.
Absolutely. He wants this, he strongly encourages this messenger to continue his ride and notify his men to meet there. He can't go out and do that and get them all organized at his farm. He's got to have somebody go to these countryside farms, rouse this militia, kind of a Paul Revere type thing, right? And get them there. Well, this particular messenger is exhausted and simply cannot continue. And Luddington himself can't make the ride because he needs to be at the farmhouse to organize the men when they arrive. So who does he point to make this ride? His 16-year-old daughter, Sybil. And she turns to her father and volunteers to be that messenger that he desperately needs. Now, do you think he wants to send his 16-year-old daughter out to do that? Absolutely not. But she's very strong-willed, she's an experienced rider, and she knows the location of the home of the men that her father needs. She's actually probably a better choice than this messenger would have been. Unfortunately, she's a 16-year-old girl. Well, this 16-year-old girl rides all night. She covers 40 miles alone and informs her father's men to report to their farm. She rides 40 miles alone. Keep in mind that this was 24 miles longer than Paul Revere, and she went alone. And all we do is talk about the great midnight ride of Paul Revere. What about Sybil Luddington? Huh? What about this girl? So the 16-year-old rides all night, covering 40 miles alone, and informs her father's men to report to their farm, and her ride is 24 miles longer than Paul Revere's, and she made it alone. Well, the next morning, Luddington's 470 militia are joined by 2,000 American soldiers, and they attack the British at Richfield, Connecticut. So the next morning, Luddington's 470 militiamen are joined by approximately 2,000 American soldiers at Richfield, just like it sounds, Connecticut. And the Americans are on the aggressive, and they attack the British. Well, they don't win the battle, but they show by their aggression that they are not going to go easily. And the key to this is the British would never attack Connecticut again during the remainder of the American Revolution, which was key because they had to get Connecticut to do what? Split the colonies in half, New England from the rest. So Sybil Luddington, who you never hear about in a history book, saves the state of Connecticut, which may have saved the colonies from being split in half, which may have saved the colonies from losing the American Revolution. So there's just another person to pay attention to in American history, Sybil Luddington. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to quit today. Tomorrow we're going to talk about the improvements in military rifles and a huge blown opportunity that the British are involved in. They screw up big time here. Okay? And so we'll talk about that tomorrow and continue on. Now my